One of the most difficult things in this entire exercise has been tracking down the original artists. Most were never credited. Very few marquees are signed. The ones that are signed, quite often they're unintelligible. And long conversations with Atari, with Sega, with Nintendo, Bally, Midway, Williams, all of those organisations, and they pretty much all told me the same thing. They farmed out the artwork. A lot of it went to advertising posters in Chicago, who are mostly famous for doing pinball, backglass and playfields. And they seem to keep a lot more records for the pinball artwork than they did for the arcade stuff. It was such a compressed time period from kind of 1979 to 1985 that they were just producing these things just, you know, 1 or 2 a day in some cases. No records were kept, and very, very few of those marquees in the book we can associate with artists. So finding Larry Day, based on his signature on the Moon Patrol marquee, was a bit of a coup. And that first tentative email to Larry, just asking very, very politely in that very English way that I tend to work in, of are you the guy and will you speak to me about it, was that was an interesting one. And Larry and I have traded numerous messages over the past couple of years. He's been really helpful in filling in some of the gaps, putting me in touch with other artists that he remembers that were never credited. And what Larry did for me was pulled out some of the original concept artwork. So these are his own pencil drawings and drawings on tissue paper and the composites, literally back in the day when they would cut and paste. He sent me artwork where he has physically cut and pasted pieces together. And to give us permission to use those in the book is something a bit special. This is something that no one has ever seen before. He pulled these out of his personal archive, and some of them are for games that were only ever rumoured to be in development that never made it to market. So a good example of that is Screw Loose. It was a game that there's one example of a board that's been found, and it was rumoured to have been in development. It never got quite finished, and it was never quite clear whether this was really destined to be a game. Well, it turns out that Larry Day produced Sharpie marker pen concept artwork for that game. So that answers one of the questions that's been bugging arcade fans for years. And there are other marquees that he produced, Conquest being a good one. Now that appears in the Arcade Museum archive as a rumoured game with no information about it whatsoever, but we have the scan of a fully finished marquee for that game. So it's been absolutely fascinating, and it's been a kind of a chain of events where Larry's answered a lot of questions, he's shared a lot of his own personal experiences with me, and then he's put me in touch with other people. So it's answered a lot of questions and filled in a lot of blanks, and we now get to credit at least some of the people that created this stuff, whose names have never been mentioned before. There's a slight tinge of sadness to some of this. Python Anghelo, who is most famous for creating the Joust artwork and for being a hell of a character as well. I knew he was ill, and I was kind of debating whether I should get in touch with him or not. I managed to get in touch with his sister, who told me it would be okay. And I got to interview Python a couple of times about his history, and he was very keen to get some of this stuff recorded. He'd been interviewed quite a few times about his pinball artwork, but I think almost never about the arcade video game pieces. And I think I spoke to him in the February, and it was a couple of months later that Python died. So it means a lot to me, and again, I've spoken to a couple of his family members, and it means a lot to them that this has now been recorded. It's not lost with Python, it's now recorded, and people get to know more of his story. That means a lot.